Welcome to Shop Talk, your monthly dose of inspiration for selling vintage and antiques online. I'm Nicole, one half of the Shop Talk duo, and Whitney is right next to me. We bring you conversations, strategies, and tips on running a thriving business that gives you life instead of taking over your life. Today we will be introducing Kristina Urquhart, publisher and founder of The Vintage Seeker, an independent media platform that connects the worlds of buying and selling with educational content.
We are so excited to have you on here, Christina, because some of us, especially in the past few months, have been seeing a lot of you on Instagram, which is delightful for some very good reasons. Yeah, so do you want to just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to chat to you both, and I'm very glad you reached out and saw me out on the interwebs. It's one of those things. I got to put my face out there. Apparently, we all do. So I've definitely been on there a lot talking about all kinds of things lately, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. But yes, I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and you introduced my website quite well. So thank you for that. My background is in journalism and media publishing. So I've spent about almost 20 years now, I guess, helping businesses reach bigger audiences through content and events, and magazine work is where my background is. I've covered a lot of industries over my career, which has given me, I think, a unique skill set when it comes to covering antiques and vintage, particularly in 2025. I started in the fine arts and then moved into retail and hospitality, and moved to branding, design, and advertising, and then manufacturing and technology, and now vintage and resale, which is actually my passion. So I am here for the long haul in some form or another. I'll be staying in this space. So I'm also a lifelong vintage lover. So very nostalgic. I'm a very emotional water sign. So I'm an old soul. And I just really connect with the stories behind secondhand and vintage. And I love being able to tell consumers more about what it is that folks like Whitney and Nicole do as your work.
Wow, that is quite the resume.
It's a lot. I know it's all over the place, but it makes it fun. That's kind of like what a journalist does. It covers all kinds of things and know a little bit of everything, which makes me a little fun at parties, but also very dangerous when you only know a little bit about everything.
I'm sure you're very fun at parties.
What was like the instigating factor that finally got you over to vintage, if you have always been a vintage lover but worked in all these other industries? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, I think it was like a lot of people, the pandemic. I think the thing that surprises people, I'm not a seller myself, right? But I talk about reselling a lot. I've been a very dedicated customer for a very long time. I've been shopping vintage forever. And over time, I think, especially as I started furnishing my own home, I started to notice patterns in my own shopping experiences, whether that was building relationships with sellers locally or just navigating customer service experiences. And then the pandemic happened, and like everybody else, I was just sitting on my couch scrolling Instagram, looking at vintage all the time. And I mean, you were both there. I'm sure you remember, like 2020 was a lot when it came to resellers and customers having discussions online, because it was this period where sellers had to start really marketing themselves on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever they happen to live, but what it is that they do in order to reach people, because you no longer could reach them in person. So it became like consumers were actually starting to learn about some of the stuff that goes into this kind of work and getting very agitated about it, right? Like the whole reseller thrift store thing, which is still a conversation we're having 5 years later, but I started noticing all these conversations were happening, and I was just really like, I need to do something creative. I was working 80 hours a week for my manufacturing job at that time, because the pandemic was a big deal for manufacturing. And I just I was like, I need to do something else creative on the side. So I added more work to my plate, because that's what I had to do, I guess. So yeah, it kind of gave me the idea that I needed a space to talk about this kind of stuff, that the industry needed a space to talk about this stuff. And so I just created one, and it's really evolved since then into all kinds of things. Professional development for sellers has been a big thing. So helping sellers to grow their businesses by bringing in experts to my membership to talk about marketing and SEO and all kinds of stuff like that. And then just trying to provide more and more resources for buyers so that they kind of understand what's going on in this space.
That's really interesting, because I do feel a lot of people, there's a lot of sellers talking, and then there's buyers that talk, but they don't really talk to each other that much, which is where I think some of the tension and friction comes online, where we try, and I see it all the time. Like the classic is the eBay reseller who posts what they bought, especially the videos, like the the garage sale videos where they go and they show, I bought this for $5 and I sold it for $100. And then it's just inviting all of these comments from people that are like, you're ripping people off. You should have paid her more. You're just bragging. And he's like, no, I'm showing you what's possible when you put a lot of work into it. And it's very interesting to just observe those interactions online, which are not always like super positive.
Right. And just to watch how the consumer doesn't make that association with that's what's happening with every product they buy at the store, right? Like when you go to Walmart, you are purchasing something and to you it seems cheap because it's $7, but they actually purchased it for 3 cents. So it's the same kind of thing, maybe 3 cents is a little low, but point being is that there's a markup on that, and people don't see that happening. But the talking between the two audiences was something that, so I spent a lot of my career, particularly in business to business media. So businesses talking to other businesses, basically. And that would be what I could do here, just create something that resellers talk to resellers. But what happens and what I found over my career is that it becomes very insular, right? It's like, let's talk about the same issues for 30 years with each other and never actually bring the customer in on the conversation. So it's strange to talk to two audiences at once sometimes. It's difficult. But what I've tried to kind of do is create content that resellers can then use to share with their customers. So that's kind of like where I see my role. So, here's with the tariff stuff, it's like, here's something that you can take and you can reshare to, your customers to let them know what's going on. So kind of trying to act as a bridge between the two.
That's huge. I feel too like
it's a lot.
Yeah, but it's like a huge impact. And I feel like, Nicole, that's why you and I kind of started Shop Talk. Was one of the things we saw was, what did we say last month? Where buyers were having negative experiences from sellers who just like, there was this mismatch of expectation sometimes and service, and kind of the sellers not understanding what customers expected and wanted, and being able to bring that to them, I think just helps everyone.
Disconnect. And especially, you have the seasoned sellers and then you have the new sellers, and they're trying their best. And we were all there at one point, and some of us are still there. But to be able to kind of guide them along, and then with Kristina kind of being the liaison between the buyer and the seller, and to try to kind of bridge that gap, like you had said, that's really big, I think. And that's definitely going to be beneficial for the people that are watching here that don't already know your account and don't know what you're all about. She's a great resource for all things buying, selling, everything like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to new audiences. It's been great to reach more people in the States. I'm started in Canada. I've slowly been growing my audience into the States over the last couple of years, but I think the tariff thing has helped a lot to kind of get in front of more people. And yeah, I think we're in an unprecedented time right now. And I don't know, I guess we could talk about it more later, but I just seeing how people interact in general online has been really quite depressing. So I think there is this overall like me era that we are kind of in. And I think that can come through both on the buyer side. I need everything from this seller. You are my person that deserves to respond to me at 11 o'clock at night kind of demands. But it also comes through in the seller too. And there's immediate kind of defensiveness that happens because that's how we operate online right now, right? If you go into any comment thread, it's like just defensiveness back and forth. So having a space where, we can be a bit more thoughtful. I'm a big proponent of I don't like to waste time on the petty kind of stuff. So I really try to speak that way when I'm talking to people in the comments and set the standard for how I want people to discuss. And yeah, I think we can all do a bit better.
The defensiveness is something that I have observed, and it is so interesting to me because that has never been my instinctual reaction. I think the classic I see, and I should also preface this, which everyone who's on Shop Talk who listens, you guys know that we don't call out or bash or anything. And if we talk about situations in general, it's just things we've observed, and we're not trying to be critical or anything, but we're just sharing. What I'm trying to say is don't take things personally, but we bring up hard conversations because we want to be able to help people find solutions. And one of the classics that I've seen over and over and over and over again is items that will arrive broken in shipping, regardless of whose fault it is. And some sellers will respond with like, it's not my problem. Like, I mean, basically saying that sucks for you, but it's not my fault and it's not my problem. And not kind of bending over backwards to help them. This customer who's genuinely upset that they paid for an item, they were so excited for it, and they paid money and then they get it and it's broken. And even if it's UPS's fault or whatever, just sort of that defensiveness of the dealer not wanting to help them with that. For me, that's just like it's a chance for you to win a customer for life when these customer service issues come up. When there's a problem, it's not you, it's not the customer. Sometimes they can come across as aggressive or upset. And part of that, I think, is the problem with just messaging and writing. And people will say something and they're not writing it aggressively, but because of our filter, we take it as aggressive, right? And then it just blows up out of proportion. And just helping the dealers see, like, this is actually an opportunity for you to be over and above excellent and help them with that. And that's just something where the defensiveness of, again, the dealer's like, don't take this personally. It broke and that really stinks. And this is how you can handle that to turn it into a positive experience for your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for every one of those, there's somebody who's like doing the 5-star Etsy seller thing and doing great. But I think customer service in general is an issue in this day and age. Like, it just is. I mean, even when you go to a restaurant as a customer, it's different than it used to be. So, I think there's more room for communication and understanding, but it's hard. Speaking from a person who lives on the internet, it is hard to take in as much as we all take in online these days, and then be able to still have discussion where we are being thoughtful and respectful.
What is your business like today?
What is it like today? So I launched in 2021. As I said, you can kind of talk more about vendors and what they do and to educate consumers. And I am still publishing website, newsletters, social media, doing webinars. In 2022, I created a professional development and networking community. I kind of alluded to that earlier for dealers, and that involved experts and held lots of member workshops on all kinds of topics. And most recently, I launched the Shop Secondhand Directory, which already has over 3,600 businesses across North America listed, all searchable by category and location. 3,600 sounds like a lot, but it's actually a really small amount because there's a ton of vendors out there, and I'd love to have it in the tens of thousands at some point, but it's a big project having shops and services and events listed on there. And the idea behind it is it was created very specifically with this industry in mind. So, you can try and find shops that offer shopping parties and consignment and all that kind of stuff. There are categories for all of that to try and surface businesses, local businesses, both physical businesses, but also businesses that are small and operate online only. So that is free to search, free to list. And for any vendors listening or watching, I encourage you to add your business yourself. It's one more place to get your shop website and your marketplace, your social media, or even your physical location if you have one discovered, especially right now when more and more people are looking to shop locally. So I'm kind of at a pivotal moment, I should say, right now. Over the next few months, I'm going to be leaning more into bringing more visibility to vendors and building my brand into more of a advocacy and resource platform. And all of this is supported by membership. So I am very grateful to the members who see value of being part of a network and of promoting their businesses more heavily through the directory, ensuring spaces like this exist for people to find reliable information. And so when you're a member, then, I've got exclusive resources and past workshops and adding your logo to the directory and all kinds of stuff. So I'm also doing consultation calls one-on-one every so often with vendors on lots of topics: content, customer experience, branding and marketing, all the areas that I can add value to. So I've got a decent amount going on still, I guess.
And another thing is you also do these Instagram lives, the hotline, which was kind of goes back to the buyer-seller connection on Instagram.
Yeah, I started that this year just as a way to, you folks started Shop Talk on Instagram Live, so as well, it's a place that people are already using, and social media platforms want us to use their tools. So I thought that it would be a relatively easy way to facilitate conversation with my more public audience. I have a lot of conversations in the membership, but those aren't always seen, of course. So I thought it'd be a good chance for my seller and consumer audiences to come together on the same call. So it's been nice to see so far. You know, I think we've covered a number of things. Tariffs has unfortunately been a recurring topic, but we've talked about local markets. We've talked about repairing items. And sort of the value that we place on secondhand and vintage items that are, maybe in need of a little more love. And that was a really nice conversation. We've talked about rag houses, so where clothing vendors get all their clothing. So it's just another opportunity to educate buyers about what sellers are doing. And, I've kind of framed it like there's a buyer section and then a seller section. So I think it helps for the vendors as well to hear those kind of buyer-focused questions and understand sort of what buyers are wanting to know about certain things. And then the vendor stuff kind of comes at the end, and then the buyers can piece on out if they're not that interested in some of the more vendor-specific chatter. But yeah, it's been going okay so far.
How often do those happen?
So they are monthly. I missed June. I had a cancellation, unfortunately. But yeah, they've been monthly. So I'm looking at other ways to continue doing that. I think, as you both know, Instagram Live is challenging. It has its own challenges. You're only hitting people when you hit them, and then for them to go back onto your page, it's not a nice viewing experience to have to go and scrub through it. I've uploaded them to YouTube, but I don't spend enough time like building my YouTube audience. That's tough too. So we'll see how they evolve in the future, but it's been a nice way to kind of bring people together beyond like the comments of the reel, where the reel is continually playing in the background. You're trying to like mute it so that you don't have to listen to it while you're trying to get a thought out.
Very cool. Okay, since we're talking about tariffs, since you mentioned tariffs, should we just dive into that?
Sounds good.
So I feel like you have probably said this like ad nauseum, but what is the latest tariff update as of September 19th, 2025?
Okay, so I don't know if I'm that up to date because I was writing notes for this morning, so there might have been something that happened, but my guess is there hasn't been. The latest, most succinct update I can give is that the de minimis rule, so the rule that allowed shipments valued at or under US $800, that was lifted at the end of August. So basically what it means is sellers around the world who were shipping into the US now have to either pay a tariff or an American customer has to pay a tariff. And that depends on how that item is coming in to the country. So it has changed everything, really, for people in this space, because people who sell vintage and antiques were sending a lot of stuff valued under US $800 into the country. The rules shift a lot. They have been shifting a lot, and it's been tricky to kind of synthesize all of that for people. I mean, I can get more into detail on what is required with each thing, but I don't know how detailed you want to get tariff rules. But that's kind of where things are at right now. It's more challenging to bring things into the United States, and there's a lot of stuff being held up at the border right now because this has all come together quite quickly, this de minimis thing. I mean, the tariffs stuff has been going on for months, but the announcement about the removal of this particular rule happened at the end of July, and there was really only a month to get it together. And usually things like this take years to implement. So it has been pretty chaotic for all parties involved, the customs agencies, the shippers, for sellers, of course. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And it's been a very scary time for a lot of people who are selling into the United States, right? Because they have built businesses around that customer base, around your customer base. So it's been very difficult for people to understand like where they're going to go. And this decision is being made for them in a way. It's also an opportunity to diversify your business, which is always a good thing. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you both about how things are going for you, because I think Whitney, you were at least bringing in some inventory before into the US, and how that's been for you if you're still ordering from overseas.
Yeah. Well, I actually haven't gotten any shipments since the end of August because I've been for a variety of reasons, and I did want to wait and kind of see how it went. Nicole, have you gotten anything in?
Haven't since August 9th when everything was instated. I tried to actually close out as much as I could. I order from a woman in France and 2 people in England. So I made sure to get those shipments through prior. The one person that I do order from in England is still shipping to the US and had mentioned that there were no issues. I think because now we're almost a month into it, they kind of became more familiar with the process of getting things over here. But hopefully I don't want to say go back to normal, but people will be more comfortable actually being able to ship into the US. Because I believe in France, or Kristina knows better than me, but the shipping services were kind of cutting off the packages and they weren't allowing them to be shipped. So I'm not sure where we stand on that right now, but yeah, I haven't received anything in the past couple of weeks.
Is Canada post back to shipping? Because you have 2 separate issues going on. You have the government postal systems, which a lot of them were shut down because the U.S. government was requiring them to collect the tariffs before the items left the country. And then you have, and no one was really set up to do that. I think the UK was the first one. They did have some systems in place for Royal Mail to be able to send packages out. That got fixed pretty quickly. But UPS, DHL, etc. are still functioning as normal. And I work with some coaching clients and they have been able to get packages. This is why it's confusing, because there's multiple layers. It depends what country you're shipping from. It also depends what carrier you're using. So for the boxes we get, they're big boxes. We're talking 24 by 16 by 16 inches, 25 kilograms, size of a suitcase. Those are not going by the postal systems. Those have always been through UPS or DHL. And those carriers are accustomed to collecting duties and tariffs, so for them to add that on was not a big deal. Then you have the extra layer of, is it vintage or antique? Most of the things, I would say 95% of what I order from the UK is antique. The antique tariff codes are way easier to figure out than the vintage, because honestly, vintage, it doesn't matter if it's vintage. It doesn't matter if it's 5 years old or if it's 30 years old. It's going to be the same code. But for antique, it's pretty simple. And then I don't pay any ad valorem. You don't pay any extra duties. It's just the 10% country of origin tariff, because all my things are made in the UK. So all that to say, my suppliers have told me that their business as usual, and it's like everyone got tizzy in a teacup for my situation, but I know a lot of sellers in Canada that have been really, really impacted by that. And so I'm curious what you have seen with Canadian sellers selling into the US, what their business status is now.
Yeah, it's great to hear that feedback and that you've been able to move things quite quickly. Like Nicole was saying, there are still countries that don't have a way to ship, basically, because the postal services don't have a way to collect the tariffs. So what's been unique in this situation is that with this rule, the postal services and carriers that are kind of tapping into the postal network, they are being required to pay the tariffs and duties ahead of time, like you said, Nicole. And that's unusual, because normally when a tariff or a duty is applied, it's the customer that pays once the item gets there. And that's what's happening with the express carriers that you mentioned. For the most part, if you order something via Purelator or DHL, as the customer, you are going to get an invoice from the person who's selling it to you. So in Canada Post, yes, before August 29th, they put in a solution. They're actually using an American company to facilitate the collection of duties. So our postal service stuff is moving. There have been delays at the border, like there have been delays for everybody at every border, because I think the customs agents are pretty overwhelmed right now. But stuff is moving via both Canada Post and all the shippers that are sort of in that wheelhouse, Chit Chat, Stallion Express. There's a bunch of them, DYK. And then there have been shipments moving through express carriers as well. So that's all fine. I think what has shocked very small business owners like independent resellers is that paying those tariffs ahead of time is where it's tricky, because for a Canadian seller to sell into the US, they have the advantage of the exchange rate because it's cheaper for an American to, maybe purchase from them in the first place. But when they add up all these fees, if they try to add the cost of that onto the price of the item in their Etsy store, then it may make it less attractive for an American customer to buy because the price is quite a bit higher all of a sudden, right? So I think there's a lot of uncertainty on how to navigate that. A lot of these businesses, they're micro businesses. They're one person. They don't have a cash flow to cover that up front. Like Shein and Temu and all those places, they're just like, okay, well, we'll just subsidize this. We'll pay. Walmart will subsidize it. When you're a small business owner, you can't do that. The money has to come from somewhere. So in the case of you ordering the antiques from the UK, that's great. I don't know what size of business it is, but whatever they're able to do, maybe if you're buying big amounts, they can work that into their prices a little bit better than
we're paying
somebody
it.
who's just selling.
We're paying
You're paying it, yeah. Okay.
Like how?
Well, right, because of the express carrier. That's right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
we're paying.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't pay for ship. It's a little bit different because it's more like I order and they don't invoice me for the shipping. So I might fill a box over a month and they don't invoice me for the shipping amount till the box is closed. And then at that point they can add on whatever the tariff is. And then I pay that. So, but Etsy, that's been a huge issue for Etsy sellers of not having those systems set up.
Yeah. It sounds like eBay is going to have a collection point at the point of sale in October. I don't know if Etsy will do the same. Still, though, I mean, when you're a customer and you're ordering a $40 item and you get that line item, I mean, people already pause at the cost of shipping, right? So I think there's a lot of fear with vendors right now, just in terms of projecting what they think a customer is going to do. So I'm trying to say, you don't know until you know. So if you open up your shop and you open up sales to the US again and see what happens, the worst that happens is you pay some Etsy fees, which are fairly minor for a while. And if nobody buys, then nobody buys. And then that gives you a little bit of lead time to at least figure out what you're going to do. But to completely stop shipping altogether when your whole business relied on shipping, it's tricky, and that's why we're already seeing there's a lot of sellers that have already announced that they're, not going to continue because of that. And I think trying everything you can before you do that is also an option.
Why do you think, because this is something that I saw too, is people had these knee-jerk, very fear-driven reactions and it was interesting to talk to some dealers who, understandably so, because I also had a lot of emotions, like my business is built on English antiques. How can I keep doing if I have to absorb all these costs? It really split up into people who were devastated, like, this is the end. I can't figure my way out of this. And then people who are like, this really stinks. I hate this, but I'm going to figure it out because I don't have any other choice. It was almost like that mental separation, I think, is what makes shops successful, is like, I don't have any other choice but to shut down versus I don't have any other choice but to figure it out. It was, yep. That the mindset, it's a mindset issue, really.
Yeah, you're speaking to I think the eternal issue of being a business owner, the need to pivot constantly. It's like there's a mantra, it's adapt or die, and it's a kind of a crass mantra, but it exists for a reason. And I think it's understandable to have those emotions and to have that knee-jerk reaction. I think it's accentuated by the fact that we have a social media environment that everybody kind of piles on and feels like as soon as you see a post from somebody saying that they're closing your shop, you're like, whoa, well, why haven't I thought about closing my shop? Like, this person, I should maybe do that too. Like, what am I doing? You get onto the forums. I try not to spend too much time on like Etsy or eBay forums. And oh my goodness, the speculation is rampant. I think keeping a level head in those moments it's really challenging, but it helps. And just collecting whatever information you can, seeing how it goes, waiting it out. The people who paused and decided to wait it out, I think that's also a wise decision. Figure it out, let the delays at the border happen, and then decide what to do. But it's hard to not have that emotional reaction, especially if you are a relatively new business owner and you haven't seen huge changes in the market yet, right? Like, the pandemic was a great time. Everybody was selling everything. And this, I won't even just say the tariffs, this past year and a half, almost 2 years at this point, it has been a very big downturn for the economy. It has been a change in consumer behavior. It has been a lot in Canada. We had a postal strike. There have been a lot of things kind of like stacking up to be against the small business owner. And so I can understand why people are just like, I've had enough and I'm going to walk away. But anybody who's been selling for a while is just like, yep, this is another period where I got to figure something out. I got to do something else. And sometimes you try everything and it's not going to work, and that's okay too. But I think, the people who have kind of seen it all before are just maybe a little bit more like, okay, I got to figure that this is just another problem I got to figure out. Yeah,
the resilience is something that's built over time, and kind of the grit. And that's one thing that I love about a lot of vintage sellers that I work with, alongside, is just the absolute grit and graft that they put into their work. It's so beyond, I think, what a lot of people realize. The physical and emotional labor of putting a business together is constant. And because I do feel like we constantly start over from scratch every time we have to find new inventory, every time we sell something, we have to go out and find it again. It's a lot, and it really does build that resilience and build your muscles as a business owner.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. That's a great thing to point out. Not saying it's any easier to be a retail shop owner who has repeatable inventory, but it's true. You don't just reorder the same thing when you are a vintage seller. And I think there's that hustle word, which has a real negative connotation, I think, when it comes to reselling because of the whole idea of being a hustler. But the idea of kind of claiming that word back and being what you do is you are having to hustle all the time. Your inventory, you're schlepping, if it's not big boxes of dishware, it's racks and bags of clothing. It's trying to figure out where you can sell when one platform isn't, giving you the returns that you want anymore. You got to turn around again. You have to keep going, going, going. And when you're self-employed, that's what you got to do. You have to hustle a bit. So I think that's absolutely true. That grit is it's a big part of this space, and it's why I love working with people like you all. I mean, I think it's so admirable and it inspires me all the time.
I think it's been very challenging for some people too, because it kind of depends on your mindset and your stress level and what other responsibilities you have on your plate. So for someone who does this full time, they might have the ability to be able to navigate through these hurdles, whereas someone who has to care for a loved one or has to take care of family or has a job on, like a full-time job or part-time job on the side, but like when you're focusing on yourself, you kind of at least I do. I focus on my job, like my shop, but you do also have other responsibilities. And I feel like it depends on where that person is at the time to see if they can really, okay, let's go full steam ahead and really try to battle this and jump over all these hurdles to get my business back on track. Or if it's, Kristina, you said a lot of people were kind of taking a step back and just putting on pause and waiting it out. If you have the flexibility to do that, there's so many different factors that come into play. And none of these are right. It's whatever works for you and your business. So it is helpful to be able to come on here with you and be able to have this discussion for other people to kind of see other viewpoints, because maybe there are sellers that don't have a community where they have a seller friends that they can kind of confide in and bounce ideas off. It does help to have Whitney, and I have a few other small shop owners that I just kind of relay information off of and just get a better understanding of where I'm at, maybe as a soundboard type of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people who are potentially also in the back of their mind thinking that it may not be something sustainable for them, it's also became like a flashpoint where it's like, okay, well, this is the decision I'm going to have to make. We've seen over the last year, there were a lot of people that started full time and they've had to go back and get other work, and start to find money elsewhere. Retail is not what it was. I mean, if you're doing great right now, then that's awesome for you. And I think that there's obviously tons of people who are making a great living doing this, but it's still overall a tough time for the market. And so if people were already feeling the effects of that, and then there has been this huge, massive shift, it's pretty overwhelming to try and be like, okay, well, now I need to find another way through if you were already kind of feeling like it may not be a long-term thing.
And I also think that having a micro business, there is the issues with cash flow and just your foundation, but also I see it almost as having a small ship versus an ocean liner, of how much easier it is to pivot in a different direction if you do have a very small team or it's just you and you're like, okay, we need to switch what we're doing. You do, just to bring up the benefits of having a smaller business, you can do that a lot more easily than a massive organization or a retail shop that has a brick and mortar. People who have brick and mortars, that's a whole different ball game that it's maybe in 5 or 10 years I want to do, but not right now. And I think also for those dealers who, you need to be careful not to compare yourself. For example, let's be honest, I have a big safety net financially because my husband is an engineer. He carries our benefits. We have kids that are healthy. We don't have major health issues that we have to be paying for. We don't have elderly family that we're taking care of. I have the financial safety net where I can take bigger risks in my business, where we have more cushion, we have that savings. And so sometimes the last thing I want is for any other dealer to compare, like, I'm going to England next month. We're both going to England next month. And to say, oh my gosh, why can't I do that? It's like, well, there's a lot in the background that maybe you don't see that is honestly allowing me to take the risk and to grow in ways where if you are using your income to pay groceries and to pay bill, which we are, my revenue goes into the family bank account and pays for our family. But if you are a single mom and you're doing this, I mean, that's a completely different game than completely different needs than for someone who has a partner who gives them that financial safety net. And so I never also want dealers, if they feel like this is not what I need in my season of life, I need to go out and get a job and do XYZ, like, you have not failed at anything. You simply need to step into something different, and there's no shame or anything that you should feel bad about for that. Like, you haven't failed at anything. You have actually succeeded in figuring out that you need something different. So just have to have that little pep talk out there.
The timing just might not be right for you at that moment. This is something that you can carry successfully, but maybe you need like that 5 years, 10 years kind of just to build that cushion to get you to where you need to be before you can continue to run it successfully.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And I will say too, one thing, I say this a lot, and anytime, especially now, it's if you do have a business and you are wanting to grow over the long term, get a separate savings account for your business. And even if you only put $10 in a month, you'll be amazed at, like, you need to have that cushion for capital investment to help carry you through with, because I see a lot of businesses fail because they don't have that cushion to carry them through and not managing. They're maybe buying too much inventory, not managing your finances well or wisely is something that means that when you do hit rock, you don't have that cushion to carry you through. So if that is something you're like, hey, I want to do this full time in the future, like 6 months from now, these are my goals, start saving for that now, because that makes such a huge difference. It gives you the freedom to take the risks and pursue the opportunities that you want to. So just a little plug.
Yes, that's great advice. I agree.
Just pivoting just a little bit, and I do want to dive a little bit more into the whole consumer perception of the market and prices and the thrift store reseller pipeline. What are you hearing from customers now? Do you feel like social media and YouTube and all that has helped them become more informed buyers, or do you still feel like there's a lot of, it's like the curtain has been lifted and people now suddenly realize where all their stuff comes from? Like, anyone can go to estate sales, anyone can go to England and shop and all of that. How has that impacted the industry and the market, and what can we as sellers do to make sure that our customers understand the value in what we bring?
Yeah, I think like all things, growth is very slow, right? I think so much has been done over the last few years to educate consumers about this space. And overall, I see more understanding from consumers of why things are the way that they are in terms of pricing, in terms of the difference between a reseller and a thrift store and how those work together and how they are very different. I think that there's been a huge shift, and I don't want to discount that shift. But sellers are still encountering these things on a daily basis. Like at a market, you know, you're still getting comments like, I could have thrifted this. This was $5 at the thrift store. And you're still getting, I mean, I don't know that we'll ever get rid of all the comments that everybody wants to say, but there's still challenging interactions at markets. Anywhere that a reseller happens to hear what a customer might be saying, there's still social media comments. And some stuff out there I think is created for clicks. So it's almost to incite this kind of angry discussion about prices. There is still a disconnect, but there has been so much done on the education of it. And we have documentaries now that are showing the volume of clothing that exists in the world. And people, I think it's starting to trickle in more, right? We have a generation of people, Gen Zs, who are very, very keenly aware of what is going on with our planet. And they are coming to secondhand from I don't want to say primarily sustainability perspective, but it's a huge part of why they are interested in it. The other part being the individuality and the uniqueness of it. But when I came into buying vintage, it was because I thought it was cool and unique and nostalgic, and I loved it. And I just didn't know enough about all of the sustainability aspects of it. And of course, there have been people who have been big sustainability proponents for years and years and years who are involved in the space. It takes sort of shopping this way to start to, I'll say it, wake up what's going on, to see what is happening, to walk into a mall and to look at all the inventory and just be like, I cannot believe that all of this stuff is new. That only comes from starting to shop this way more and more. You start to question the decisions that you've been making. And I think it's an interesting phenomenon that I was talking about this with a seller recently, just as a vendor, having those customers of yours who have been customers for a long period of time supporting you, and then they kind of are in this stage of their life where they have bought tons of great vintage from you, they've shopped sustainably, they've done all the things, and they start buying less. And so you need to, as the vendor, replenish those people over and over again, because you've got this sort of like tap out point where, you know, people are always going to want to refresh their homes or refresh their closets, but it's not quite the same as getting somebody who's new to the space and then starts buying one secondhand thing, and then they buy another, and then, you know, they buy another. And you touched on another great point about people starting to do it themselves. And so that's, I mean, it's not for everybody though. And I think people get interested in the hunt because it's fun, and thrifting's fun, and going to an estate sale is fun. But in order to find the volume and the quality of things that a reseller finds, like you folks, it is it's a full-time job, or it's at least a full-time job on the side of another full-time job. And most people do not have the time or really the desire to do it that much themselves. So yes, it's a phenomenon, I think, that people are doing it themselves, but I still see such a huge demand for what the reseller does, that curation aspect. I mean, curation is kind of the thing going forward, right? Like, we live in an AI world where everybody can get everything at all times, all the information. So curating it, finding out what people want to buy, and then finding those items for them and presenting it to them in an appealing and attractive way. There's such a huge need for it.
People are paying you for your lens. That was something I got from, I did a workshop a few weeks ago, and it was primarily for designers and interior decorators. And that is what they said is different now versus 30 years ago. 30 years ago, designers had access to trade sources that the general public didn't. And they had access to even antiques and vintage dealers that could give them what they wanted. And now it's all there. It's all on the internet. The customer, the client can go and find it for themselves. But what has shifted is that the clients know that, but they want to pay the designer for their specific framework where they're putting these things together. And I do think that one of the ways forward for dealers is that you have to think like a designer. People are going to pay you for your lens, for your unique style and the way that you bring things together, present them, use them, the story that you're able to tell with the pieces. And it's not just walking into a thrift store and finding something and turning around and selling it for $100. Like, that's a myth. That's not a business. And so I think for dealers who really want to make this their profession, that is what you have to like position yourself and brand yourself as.
Well, that, and sometimes the consumer, the customer, they want to do something to refresh their homes. They see these inspiration photos, or they have a Pinterest board and they want these certain things. And yes, they have access to the entire internet where you could really buy whatever you want, whenever you want. But the thought of that is just so overwhelming that if they find you and they trust you and they say, hey, this is kind of what I'm going for, can you help? Then that's really good too. You want those types of customers. Maybe they don't even know what their style is. Like, how many design shows have you seen, especially on like HGTV? And I'm talking like way back when there's a couple and the husband wants a certain thing and the wife wants a certain thing, but they don't know how to like compromise and kind of mesh their styles together. You have to think of that too with what you're selling. So Whitney and I both sell home decor pieces, I guess you would say. We don't get into the clothing. For us, this is more for homes. So maybe your customer doesn't really know what they like, and they only know what they like when they see something that you present to them. And the way you present it to them sparks like an idea or an inspiration for, oh, I found this painting that Whitney had that she said is antique. It's from England. I'm going to use that as the inspiration for redoing my entire living room. And then they pull in different pieces and they like the style of the items that she provides, or they like her vibe. Then maybe they'll be more inclined to be a continuous customer of hers and then look forward to what she's bringing in her upcoming collections to see if they can add that to their house. So I think it's very interesting because one of my professors in college, so I went to school for interior design. I'm working in architecture now. That's a whole story. But anyway, my professor had said that interior designers are kind of like interior psychologists. So you're helping your client figure out what they want and helping their partner figure out what they want together. And I feel like sometimes we act as that when I receive messages from people, not all the time, but enough, where they kind of just are looking for some guidance. Like, I have this and I want to be able to pair it with something else. Can you help? And I think even providing content, which I really need to get into doing more because I'm like lacking, but to be able to communicate that or to be able to spark some sort of inspiration for people that maybe aren't very visual. Like my mother cannot visualize anything. I kind of have to do it for her and show her. But there are people like that, whereas I'm pretty visual where I can see certain things. So maybe just communicating with your customer to be able to help them understand what they're doing or to blend two styles together so that it looks cohesive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think showcasing vintage, antiques, secondhand pieces in a modern and appealing way also helps to just normalize it more and increase acceptance and shift perceptions. I mean, it's very easy for the three of us who, kind of live and breathe this space to say that nobody has a problem with secondhand anymore and more people are interested in shopping in it. But there still are a lot of people out there who have an inherent deep-seated feeling about the value of used goods, about not wanting used goods in their homes. Now, you can't change everybody's mind, of course, but the more that you can show it as the seller, as the vendor, the more that you can show it in a modern arrangement, show an item being used in a different way than it was intended for, to kind of spark that. A person might come to a market or your booth and see a collectible plate and be like, I'm not going to hang this on my wall like my grandma did because that's, maybe not their style. But if you can show how to use that collectible plate in like 16 other ways or 10 other ways or 5 other ways, even on just a social media reel, it can really go a long way to help people make those connections and to, again, turn to you as the person who knows what to do with all this stuff, right? You mentioned that you're an interior designer, and I just wanted to, we talked a little bit about pivoting your business and diversifying, especially in light of issues like what we've seen in 2025. And I think anybody listening who is a visual person or who can think of another skill that could add something to their business. I mean, being an interior designer and also selling vintage decor it's such a great thing. You have a very specific eye, a very specific style. So for anybody who's looking to sort of diversify, adding another skill to your plate can help. I mean, I had a member session recently with somebody who is a professional appraiser, and she said there's a real need for appraising and there's not enough people doing it. So you need to appraise for insurance purposes, for real estate purposes. There's all kinds of opportunities within this space that are not just selling. I don't want to say just selling, but in order to ensure that your business keeps moving forward, finding ways that you can bring something else in that really makes you different and stand out, like your interior design.
That's huge. I know a lot of dealers who have kind of added that on, and it just makes sense. Like it makes sense to be able to sell the items and then be kind of a one-stop shop. That's something another podcast on antiques that talks a lot about is she's like the antique stores of the past where it's just all only antiques, full of antiques like that. That's done. That's over. It's really more of being a concept store and a destination. Again, this lifestyle. So my favorite antique stores here in Kansas City, like the one we went to, Nicole, when you were here, the French store, Pear Tree, it's probably 75% antiques from France and England, but then there were some modern watercolors. There are ceramics made by a French maker. There were candles. There's decor books. So it's sort of like this place where you can come and you have the home that you want to create, the experience. And so much of it for me is wrapped up in story and helping people create homes that nurture them, that create safe spaces for their relationships and for their loved ones, and story, like for them to be able to find pieces that tell a story to them or that they learn from. And that's what you get when you walk into these stores, is it's more of what kind of story do you want to tell in your home? Do you want it to just be a generic, big box store story, or do you want something that actually has its own story of a past, and then you can fold it into, and there's nothing I love more than when I explain about what a piece is and you kind of light that fire in the customer. And then they say, I'm going to tell that to everyone that comes into my house. The whole backstory of this antique pot that got dug up from England and that I use, that's when you've been able to pass on the torch to your customer, and they get it. Those are my favorite kinds of clients that I love to work with. They get the reason that we're so passionate about what we do.
Yeah, I think that there's something else to be said about that customer coming in because the store was the way that you said. The one that you use the example of, it's got antiques and it's also got modern art in it and it's got ceramics, and that customer may not have come in otherwise if it wasn't like that. And I think something I see a lot in this space, and again, this is not to specifically call any person out, it's just more of a trend of a very staunch belief in vintage is vintage, antique is antique, and that people are still kind of holding on to that. And I think knowing not just your customer is important, but knowing how customers in general shop right now, how people want to shop, how people like to look online, and how people want to feel when they walk into a store. A person may have purchased an antique pot from a curated store and they would have never gone into the antique shop that was stuffed to the rafters. There is a customer for that, of course. But I think understanding the way that the modern shopper wants to shop is something that's really important for dealers in this space to try to kind of adapt to the times. We have a market here in Toronto. It was a long-running antique market downtown, antiques, and it moved locations, and there was a new one that came in its place. So this one still existed. It's in a different part of town, but the new one came into its space, and the concept behind it was a lot more like we were talking about with these stores. It's got handmade stuff, it's got antiques, it's got loud thumping music, there's a DJ that plays, and it's not your typical antique show. And there was a lot of pushback in the community, in the antique community, about that event. When it first started, I think people are used to it now. But it brought in a whole new audience of people who had never, ever gone to the other antique market, who had never even thought about shopping antiques. And now it brought them into this world. So I think accepting where we're at is such a huge part of being in this space right now. And I think that's hard, right? Because we're in a space that's based on the past, old things and nostalgia and loving the way that things were. But we also have to turn and look at how are people going to buy right now, and what is it that they're attracted to? What makes them want to look further? What makes them want to come into your world as a shop owner? What makes them want to be part of your community? Because people really want to feel connected right now, especially when they're buying from a small business.
That market sounds fabulous. I wish it wasn't so far away.
It's fun.
But that is a really innovative way to widen the audience, to kind of give you a little taste of everything.
As we go ahead and wrap up this hour in this conversation, where can people find you? We'll have all of this links in the show notes, but where should people go first to find you online?
So probably easiest for people is just Instagram at the.vintage.seeker. Thevintageseeker.ca is also where I live. That's my website. And secondhanddirectory.com. You can get there via the other website too. That's the directory that I was talking about earlier. So you can find me in all of those places. You can sign up for free newsletters on my website and yeah, I'm happy to chat all the time. My DMs are always open.
Well, thank you for being here today. And thank you again for just everything that you're doing for the community, for the industry, for dealers. You give and give and give all the time. And we're so appreciative of all the information that you've been sharing and just putting out there. So if you are listening to this, make sure you go and find Kristina online. Tell her that you watched or listened to this podcast episode. And Nicole and I will be back again very soon with another fun guest here on Shop Talk. Also, if you would like to become a sponsor for Shop Talk, we invite you to send me, Whitney, at Conard & Co. on Instagram, or Nicole a message, and we would love to do some shop shout outs here on Shop Talk for $5 a month. If you would like to sponsor an episode, we would love to share your shop handle and name with our audience. And we just appreciate all of your support as we grow our platform. We're starting to use Riverside and some different things to get our podcast out to you, and they do cost a little bit of money. So if you would like to sponsor an episode, we would love to say thank you. So contact us for details on that, and catch us next time for a next episode of Shop Talk.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.